We'll split it all tonight, Sarah laughed, clinking glasses at the so-called early inheritance party. Margaret Davis, their mother, was still fighting her way back from a stroke in the ICU, but she heard every word. Her children, the ones she'd raised through sacrifice and sickness, toasted like she was already gone. And when the front door opened, Margaret walked in, alive, watching their smiles collapse into silence. I'm curious, where in the world are you joining us from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed for all the latest updates. One heartbeat slipped, and so did their masks. The fall wasn't dramatic. No screams, no final words. Eleanor simply crumpled beside the kitchen counter, the kettle still whistling on the stove. The mug slipped from her hand, shattering against the tile, but she barely registered the sound. Her left side felt heavy, foreign. The room tilted, then vanished. Bright white, steady beat, a ceiling she didn't recognize. When Eleanor blinked awake, she was in a hospital bed, a nasal cannula in place, and wires trailing from her chest. Her throat was raw, her limbs sluggish. One wouldn't move at all. A nurse noted. "You're in the ICU," she said softly, touching Eleanor's arm. "You had a major stroke, but you're stable now, just rest." Eleanor wanted to speak, to ask how long she'd been out, but her mouth wouldn't cooperate. She blinked slowly, letting the information settle. Stroke, ICU, stable. The next few days blurred together. She drifted in and out of sleep. Words jumbled in her mind. She caught flashes of medical terms: paralysis, rehab, long recovery. What she didn't hear was familiar voices. "No, Mom. No, how are you feeling?" No hands squeezed hers in reassurance. "Abuau." Once, she thought she heard Julia's laugh in the hallway. Another time she imagined Claire's perfume, but no one came into the room. No flowers, no cards, just silence. "Abuau." Late one night, voices passed by her cracked door. Two nurses, whispering. "Already asked about estate papers." Eleanor's heart stilled. The other nurse replied, more hesitantly. "That's her kids. Yeah, only came once. Didn't stay long." Footsteps faded, the machines beeped on, and something inside her broke in a way the stroke hadn't. "Abuau." Her eyes welled up, not from pain, but recognition. They were circling, waiting, not for her to get better, but for her to go. "Abuau." The next day her night nurse returned, a younger woman with warm eyes named Anna. She adjusted Eleanor's blanket, then paused. "I thought you should see this," Anna said softly, sliding something from her pocket. "I found it online. I'm sorry." She placed a printed photo gently on the tray table, and stepped away. Eleanor blinked, trying to focus. There they were. Martin, Claire, Julia, dressed in black tie clothes, holding glasses of champagne. A golden sign in the background read, "Early Inheritance Celebration." The caption on the photo, "Cheers to freedom and funds." "Abuau." For a long moment, Eleanor stared, then she exhaled, slowly, controlled. No tears came, just a rising heat in her chest that steadied her fingers and narrowed her vision. A kind of clarity that didn't need full movement to be felt. Her children had already buried her in their minds, in their plans, but they had no idea. "I'm not gone yet," she whispered, her voice cracked but alive. "Abuau." A kind nurse slips her a photo. Her children at a lavish party captioned, "Early Inheritance Celebration." I was barely alive. They were already dividing me. Eleanor stared at the photo, until the edges curled in her hand. There they were, her three children, grinning like they'd won something. Martin, in a tailored blazer he couldn't possibly afford. Claire, beaming in diamonds she hadn't. Julia, raising a glass like a queen toasting a kingdom. Behind them a golden banner shouted, "Early Inheritance Party." And below the image, dozens of comments. "Guess Mom won't be needing that beach house, huh? Spend it while it's hot." One way to grieve. The hospital lights buzzed faintly above. The beeping of machines faded behind the roar in Eleanor's ears. She had survived a massive stroke, and while she fought to move her hand again, to speak again, her children had been drinking champagne and joking about her will. Her grip tightened around the photo, the trembling more rage than weakness. Every memory of sacrifice hit like a hammer. Martin's gambling debt she'd cleared twice. Claire's private university tuition she'd paid in full. quietly selling her antique silver set to do it. Julia's boutique failure she'd cleaned up with her own retirement fund. Every time, Eleanor had shown up, quietly, lovingly, stupidly. Now she saw it. Not loyalty, not gratitude, entitlement. Apois. She closed her eyes. She could still hear Claire's voice from years ago. If something happens to you, I assume the lake house is mine, right? She had laughed back then, brushed it off, but they hadn't been joking. The door creaked open. Anna entered with a fresh pitcher of water. She paused when she saw Eleanor clutching the photo again. They didn't come back, Anna said quietly. Not once. Eleanor nodded. I've seen families show up every single day, even for patients in comas. Anna continued. But you're alone here. Eleanor looked down, forcing her fingers to flex. She managed to curl one around the edge of the photo. Not for long, she rasped. Anna blinked. What do you mean? I'm not dying here, Eleanor said. Her voice was gravel, but it carried steel. Anna leaned in. Good. Eleanor didn't need vengeance. She needed clarity. And maybe just a little justice. Apois. Later that night, Anna returned to adjust Eleanor's pillows. You should rest, she said gently. If you want to get strong enough to leave. Eleanor looked at the framed photo on the nightstand. Not of her children, but of her late husband. The last protector she'd ever had. I will leave, she said. And next time they toast to my death. Her voice hardened. I'll be standing at the door. Eleanor decides she will attend the next celebration. Healing became my weapon. The therapists came in with soft voices and clinical smiles. They expected gratitude. What they got was focus. Eleanor didn't nod, didn't thank them. She just worked. One raised finger, one shifting toe, one breath at a time. Not for survival, for strategy. She told them what they wanted to hear. Yes, I'll take it slow, but in her mind, a countdown had started. Every morning, she forced her limbs to obey. Lift. Lower. Hold. Again. Pain flared, then dulled, then flared again. She welcomed it. Pain meant progress. The nurses were kind, but Eleanor trusted only Anna, the only one who hadn't looked at her like a half-finished obituary. Don't tell them, Eleanor whispered one morning, as Anna changed her IV bag. Tell who what? My children. Don't say I'm improving. Anna didn't ask why. She just nodded. Eleanor's recovery became a secret, a weapon wrapped in silence. Every hour alone was spent rehearsing. How to hold a spoon without shaking. How to walk 10 steps, then 20, with the cane. How to hide her trembling when it came time to face them. By the third week, Eleanor could speak in full sentences. Her voice came back slower than her rage, but it came back steady. I want my files, she told Anna one night. Home documents, deeds, will, trusts. Everything. Anna brought in a locked briefcase she had collected from Eleanor's lawyer. Eleanor opened it with hands that no longer felt fragile. Inside were her late husband's original will, never updated, never revoked. A sealed envelope, marked private to be used, if they come for blood. Eleanor smiled grimly. Her husband had always known this day might come. That night, she stayed up reading every document, lips moving silently as she scanned the pages. The new will she would write would not leave them destitute, just deserving. Everything. 2 days later, Anna wheeled in an envelope. No return address. She just dropped off at the front desk. Inside was a glossy invitation card. Eleanor read it slowly, once, then again. Martin, Claire and Julia invite you to a special evening. A celebration of new beginnings. Location Martin's house. Dress code, black tie. Date, 1 week from today. On the back, scribbled in Claire's handwriting. Hope you're resting, Mom. We'll toast to you again. Eleanor placed the card on the tray table. She looked up at Anna. I'll need a dress. Black. Simple. Strong. Anna smiled. You'll need shoes too. I'll walk through that door, Eleanor said. They won't even recognize me. Laughter spilled from the open windows of Martin's mansion. Crystal clinked. Music pulsed low. Through the tall windows, Eleanor could see the shimmer of champagne flutes raised like weapons made of glass. The invitation had called it a celebration of new beginnings. But inside it was anything but subtle. Every sudden, Martin stood near the fireplace, swirling a drink, and boasting to a group of guests. Thinking about getting the new Jaguar. I mean, why not? He grinned. Life's short, and the estate's already falling into place. Claire was across the room, dressed in gold sequins, holding court. She always said I had her taste. She laughed, twirling a diamond bracelet around her wrist. I'm just making sure her legacy is worn well. Julia leaned against the bar, glass of red in hand, chatting with a real estate agent. The beach house is practically mine, she said, just waiting on paperwork to catch up with the inevitable. A chapter finished. Guests whispered, amused, intrigued. I heard they already picked out who gets the piano. So the will's settled? She's still alive, right? Her cane rested across her lap. The simple black dress fit her better than any armor. Her hair was pinned, her face calm, but her hands, tight fists in her lap, told the real story. You ready? Anna asked gently. Eleanor nodded once. Open the door. Anna reached for the handle. Inside, the music shifted to a slow instrumental. The chatter dulled as the doorbell rang. Claire looked toward the entrance, brows furrowed. Who else is coming? Martin set his drink down. Probably more press. You know how people love legacy drama. Julia smirked. Unless it's a ghost. The butler opened the door. Silence poured into the room like a wave. Eleanor stepped forward. No wheelchair, no nurse hovering. Just her, on her feet, cane steady, eyes sharper than any of them remembered. She crossed the threshold like someone returning to land after a shipwreck. Gasps rippled. A few guests stepped back instinctively. One woman set her wine down without realizing her hand was trembling. Martin's face drained of color. Mom? Claire's voice cracked. You're supposed to be. She caught herself. I mean, we thought. Eleanor scanned the room, slow and deliberate. Her gaze stopped on the banner over the fireplace. Cheers to new freedoms. She turned back to them, eyes calm, celebrating something. Julia tried to laugh. It's just symbolic. Eleanor said nothing. She moved deeper into the room. Her cane tapped across the floor, each step echoing louder than the last. Guests parted like a tide. Anna stood just outside, watching through the open doorway, arms folded. Eleanor stopped near the piano. The same piano Martin had once begged her not to sell to pay for his rehab. She touched one key lightly. Middle C. It rang out. Pure, steady. Then she turned. Martin cleared his throat. We didn't mean it like that. No? She replied, her voice like ice beneath velvet. Because the caption under that last party photo said, and I quote, cheers to Mom's long nap. Claire's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Eleanor reached into her bag. The guests leaned in. She pulled out a sealed envelope and held it up. The room went still. I brought something, she said. The fire behind her crackled once. The ghost they toasted walked in alive. The room held its breath. Eleanor stood just inside the door, framed by gold chandeliers and false sentiment. Every face stared, frozen in a mix of disbelief, guilt, and for a few Martin stepped forward first, voice a half-whisper. Mom? She met his eyes. You look well fed. His lips parted, but no reply came. You're supposed to be in the ICU. Eleanor walked forward, her cane clicking against marble. Each tap cut through the murmurs like punctuation in a confession. I was, she said. Then I woke up. Eleanor scanned the room, faces blurred together, laughter silenced, greedy hands now held still. Then she looked at Julia, the youngest, the loudest, the one who'd bragged about inheriting the beach house. Julia blinked first. This is a misunderstanding, she said quickly. We were just having friends over, celebrating life. Mine. Apparently, Eleanor replied, lifting the envelope. Anna stood just beyond the threshold, watching from the doorway like a silent sentinel. She didn't move. She didn't need to. Inside, Eleanor took her time, her gaze grazing the expensive charcuterie spread, the hand-carved ice sculpture, the printed cocktail napkins that read, "The future is ours." I updated some paperwork, she said. Figured you'd want to be the first to know. Martin's forehead wrinkled. Paperwork. Legal documents, she said flatly. Wills. Trusts. Ownership deeds. The sort of things you've all been so curious about lately. Claire moved toward her too fast, too desperate. Mom, come sit down. We can talk about. Eleanor didn't move. You had your chance to talk when I was fighting for my life. Is that really their mother? She doesn't look sick at all. I heard they were throwing inheritance parties. Phones came out. Cameras clicked. Phones came out. Cameras clicked. Julia hissed at Martin. Do something. Martin tried. He stepped closer. Look, Mom, we didn't mean to hurt you. We were scared. We thought we'd lose you. You did, Eleanor said quietly. And now you're going to learn what that means. One of the guests tried to lighten the tension with a nervous laugh. Should we be worried? Eleanor turned to him with a ghost of a smile. Only if you raised your children to betray you. Silence. Hadis. She laid the sealed envelope gently on the grand piano. It stood between them, like a ticking bomb. I came tonight not to fight, she said calmly, but to deliver the future you were so eager to claim. Then she stepped back, cane steady, eyes bright. Open it when the party's over. I didn't want to ruin your mood, because for the first time in my life, I'm not asking any of you for anything. Outside, the wind picked up. Leaves skittered across the steps. Inside, Eleanor turned toward the exit. She paused only once, just enough to leave them wondering what was written in that envelope. Then she walked out. Hadis. She speaks calmly. You celebrated too soon. She holds up a sealed envelope. They planned my funeral. I planned their future. The guests trickled out slowly, avoiding eye contact with the three siblings now huddled around the grand piano, like children caught stealing from the cookie jar. The envelope sat there, unopened, heavy, daring them. Hadis. Julia crossed her arms. This is a bluff. Claire shot her a look. She walked in on her own. That was no bluff. Martin finally picked up the envelope and turned it over. His name was on the seal, along with Claire's and Julia's, all handwritten in their mother's unmistakable cursive. Just open it, Claire snapped. He broke the seal. Inside, a single typed page on letterhead. A copy of the updated will. At the top, bold and clear, revised last will and testament of Eleanor Whittaker. Claire grabbed it from Martin's hands, eyes scanning fast, then froze. Her voice dropped. She gave it all away. Julia laughed nervously. What are you talking about? She rewrote the will, Claire said, voice rising. Everything's been donated. The house, the investments, the account. It's all going to charities, community scholarships, a veterans trust fund. Hadis. Julia lunged for the page. No, that can't be legal. It's notarized, Martin said bitterly, pointing at the stamp at the bottom. Dated last week. Claire stepped back like she'd been slapped. But we're her children. That didn't stop you from throwing a party in her absence, came a voice from the hallway. Anna entered quietly, her presence like a moral earthquake. I told her not to come tonight, she said. Told her she owed you nothing. But she said you deserved the truth. And a front row seat to it. Martin turned red. Who are you two? She's the one who helped your mother learn to walk again. Anna replied coolly. While you were busy measuring curtains for a house you didn't own. The room spun with shock, but the page in Julia's hands was irrefutable. Claire dropped onto the couch, stunned. She can't just cut us off like that. Anna arched a brow. She didn't. She redirected the future. The way you redirected her trust. Texts flooded in from guests who had recorded Eleanor's entrance, and were now sharing it online. The videos were spreading, fast. Martin's face twisted. This is a PR disaster. Claire clutched the will. She humiliated us. Anna stared at her. No, Claire, you did that yourselves. Julia's hands were shaking. We'll take her to court. Anna gave a sad smile. She's ready. Hadis. The three stood in silence, trapped in the gravity of their own greed. Claire whispered. We have to fix this. Martin stared at the will. There's no fixing anything. Julia's eyes lit with something colder. Unless we drag her through court, and prove she's not of sound mind. Anna's jaw tightened. She's sharper than all three of you combined. They thought a judge would silence me. Hadis. 3 days later a courier arrived at Eleanor's beach house. Anna accepted the envelope, her expression hardening as she handed it over. Eleanor sat in the sunroom, a knitted shawl around her shoulders, sipping tea with steady hand. She didn't flinch when she read the return address: Whitaker and Hayes, LLP. Martin's firm. Inside, a formal petition. Her children were suing her. Grounds: diminished mental capacity. Objective: to void her revised will. Slowly, she folded it in half and placed it on the side table. Anna hovered. "Are you okay?" Eleanor smiled faintly. "I expected worse." He'd handled their finances for decades. And more importantly, he'd helped her create the revisions they were now contesting. He answered on the second ring. "You told me to call if the wolves came to feed," she said. His chuckle was dry. "Looks like it's open season. I'll be there tomorrow with everything we need." Hades. The second call was to a young lawyer her husband had once mentored. Amara Vega, now one of the most tenacious estate litigators in the state. "You'll be representing me," Eleanor said. "Good." Amara replied, "because I don't lose to entitled trust fund scavengers." Physical therapy records, showing remarkable cognitive and motor recovery. Anna's sworn statement about the children's absence during recovery. But that wasn't the ace in the deck. Miles handed Eleanor a sealed manila folder. "These were never meant to be used," he said. "But I think your husband knew." She opened it. Inside were financial records, emails, signed, bank slips, all pointing to one ugly truth. Martin had been forging Eleanor's signature for months before the stroke. High-interest loans, private withdrawal, a falsified second mortgage on a cabin she didn't even know he'd sold. Her hands didn't tremble. Her eyes didn't water. She simply said, "Then court will hear everything." The story of 3 adult children suing their stroke survivor mother for her inheritance didn't land the way they'd hoped. Claire's social media went dark. Martin's law firm issued a bland statement of non-involvement. Julia tried to spin it, telling a podcast it was about protecting their mother from manipulation. But the truth had momentum now. Hades. Amara stood in Eleanor's kitchen 2 days before the hearing. "They'll fight dirty. They're going to try to paint you as unstable, emotional, confused." Eleanor stirred sugar into her tea. "Let them." "Why?" She looked out the window toward the beach. "Because the truth doesn't need to yell. It just needs to stand." Attorney reveals Martin forged her signature months ago for loans. Eleanor whispers. "Then court will hear everything. They expected a frail woman. I brought 5. The courtroom was colder than Eleanor expected. Not in temperature, in silence. A kind of hush that made everything louder. The shuffle of papers, the scratch of a pen, the slow creak of her cane as she walked to her seat. Heads turned. Phones stopped. Even the court clerk paused as Eleanor moved past the gallery, spine straight, chin high. No one expected her to walk in on her own. She made sure she did. Martin looked polished, but his eyes kept flicking toward the judge's bench. Claire avoided Eleanor's gaze completely. Julia smirked with rehearsed defiance, her lipstick too red, her earrings too loud for a courtroom. Their attorney stood, clearing his throat. "Your Honor, we are here to establish the mental and cognitive incapacity of Mrs. Eleanor Whitaker. I am here," Eleanor said, rising, "and I am capable of hearing every word." The courtroom turned. The judge raised an eyebrow, duly noted. "Mrs. Whitaker, your attorney will have her time." Amira rose gracefully beside her. "Thank you, Your Honor. We'll show that not only is Mrs. Whitaker of sound mind, but that the plaintiffs, her own children, have a long history of financial misconduct, emotional manipulation, and exploitation." Claire's eyes widened. Julia leaned in and whispered something to Martin, who didn't respond. The first witness was Dr. Marin, Eleanor's neurologist. "She passed every mental competency test with above-average results," he said. "Post-stroke, she has demonstrated strong memory retention, reasoning, and independence." "And would you consider her decision to revise her will irrational?" Amira asked. "Not at all," he replied. "Given her circumstances, it was lucid and justifiable." Next came Anna. She stepped into the witness box and folded her hands calmly. "I was there when they didn't show up," she said. "I was there when she learned to stand again. I saw every hour of pain they couldn't be bothered to witness." Claire squirmed. Julia rolled her eyes. Anna leaned into the mic. "They threw a party before the machines were even unhooked." Gasps fluttered through the gallery. Amira approached Eleanor. Would you like to speak, Mrs. Whitaker? She nodded. With slow, even steps, Eleanor rose and walked to the stand. People leaned forward. She didn't need to shout. I meant again. I gave my children everything, she said, voice calm but thick with weight. I paid their tuition. I cleared their debts. I co-signed loans. I defended them when no one else would. She looked directly at Mark, and while I was recovering from a stroke, they asked about my will. She turned to the judge. So I rewrote it. Not out of spite, out of clarity. Her hands rested gently on the wooden rail. You see, when someone shows you how they value you, believe them. Amara smiled as she sat down. On the opposing bench, their lawyer tried damage control. She's emotionally unstable, he argued. Recovering stroke patients often suffer from confusion. This was clearly an impulsive decision, but the judge had seen and he leaned back, fingers steepled. This court finds no indication that Mrs. Whitaker was of unsound mind when amending her estate. However, before I issue a final ruling, I'll be reviewing all financial exhibits submitted, including the documents referencing forged signature. Martin flinched. The judge calls for a recess. Verdict to be delivered in 2 weeks. Peace became my shield in the storm. The court mouse faded behind her like a bad dream. Eleanor didn't look back once. Anna drove in silence, soft jazz filling the car. Neither of them spoke until the winding road gave way to open sea. The beach house stood waiting, unchanged, unwavering, like it had held its breath through all the betrayal, just as she had. Eleanor stepped inside, took off her shoes and let her feet sink into the old hardwood. I'm home, she whispered. But it wasn't for anyone else, just for herself. Next morning, she opened the windows and let the ocean in. Sea salt, wind, gulls crying in the distance. It was the first morning she didn't check the mail expecting venom or legal summons. Instead, she put on a sweater, brewed a strong cup of black coffee, and picked up her journal, a navy leather-bound one she hadn't touched since before the stroke. September 15th. The trial begins to fade, but their faces do not. I wonder if they know yet what they've really lost. Not money again. She started volunteering at the local community kitchen again, the same place she and her husband once spent their Saturdays, back when giving came with joy. At first, people whispered behind her back. Then they whispered closer. That's her, the inheritance mother. Strangers thanked her. Some cried. Others shared their own stories of betrayal, of family, of unexpected strength. Eleanor didn't always respond. She just listened. One afternoon, the kitchen director approached her. We're organizing the annual fundraiser gala. The board wants you to be the keynote speaker. Eleanor paused, dish towel in hand. Me, you stood up to something most people only survive quietly. You didn't just endure it. You showed the world how to respond with dignity. That night, back at the beach house, she sat on the back porch as twilight pressed its hand over the ocean. The sun dipped low and orange behind waves, softening the edges of everything. Anna stepped out with 2 cups of tea. You're really going to do it, she asked. Eleanor nodded, eyes still fixed on the horizon. If they want a story, I'll give them one. Less about revenge, more about reclamation. She didn't want to punish. She wanted to reclaim her name, her worth, her life. In between writing, she read books from her husband's old shelf, organized photos, donated old coats, made soup from scratch. The little things, the things her children never noticed, reminded her of who she had always been. A week before the gala, a white envelope arrived in the mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single card with slanted, nervous handwriting. Grandma, I saw you on the news. I'm sorry. I miss you. Leo. Her hands trembled for the first time in days. Julia's son. Her grandson. Then that's where you start next. A local charity asks her to keynote their gala. She accepts, nervous but determined. They mocked me at a party. I rose at my own. Round tables were dressed in navy linens. Name cards written in gold ink. At the far end stood a podium with a single mic, polished and waiting. Eleanor stood backstage, fingers wrapped around the edge of her cane. She wore a slate blue dress, understated but elegant. Her silver hair was pulled back. A pearl pin, her husband's last gift, gleamed quietly at her collar. From behind the curtain, Anna whispered, "You look like you own the night." Eleanor gave a small smile. "I don't need to, I just need to walk through." The MC took the stage, introduced her name, and the applause began. Light at first, then rising, wave after wave. She walked slowly to the podium, cane tapping gently in rhythm with each step. Not a limp, not weakness, just presence. The room fell quiet. She adjusted the mic. No notes, no script, just memory. "Thank you," she began. "I wasn't always sure I'd stand behind a microphone again. I wasn't sure I'd walk again." A pause, but betrayal has a way of rebuilding your legs. A murmur of emotion swept through the crowd. "I spent 35 days in a hospital bed, while my body relearned how to obey me and my children forgot I existed. Except of course when they thought I might not make it." A few heads dropped, others nodded, grim-faced. A few heads dropped, others nodded, grim-faced. "I'm not here tonight for sympathy. I've had enough of that. I'm here because dignity deserves its moment. Not just mine, yours too." She let that hang in the air. "I rewrote my will when I realized that what we pass on should never reward cruelty. It should elevate love, integrity, and community. And that's why I chose all of you." Applause rose again, steady, stronger. Across town, Claire sat on her couch, wine glass, untouched, watching the live stream with a blank expression. Julia had muted the screen. Martin didn't show up at all. Their mother didn't mention their names. She didn't need to. They heard themselves between every line. Back in the ballroom, Eleanor closed with a story. "My husband and I bought a house by the ocean 40 years ago. We couldn't afford it, but we promised it would hold memories. It did. And it still does. What it won't hold anymore is entitlement. What it will hold is purpose." She smiled. "I've named that house as the future site of a recovery center for stroke survivors. People like me, who've been silent, underestimated, or left behind." Gasps. Then a wave of applause. Real, roaring, sustained. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned in. Anna wiped her eyes backstage. When Eleanor stepped away from the mic, people stood, not out of pity, not out of politeness, but because truth sometimes deserves a standing ovation. A young woman approached her near the punch table. "My mother went through something similar. You gave her and me a voice tonight." Eleanor squeezed her hand gently. Then it was worth. That night, she returned home to the beach house. The tide was out, moonlight catching every ripple. She slipped off her shoes and walked the sand barefoot. Cool grains soothing tired feet. When she looked back at the house, it wasn't a symbol of pain anymore. It was promise. Her lawyer calls. Verdict is ready. The law weighed blood against truth. Eleanor arrived at the courthouse with the same calm she'd worn to the gala. But this time she wasn't alone. Anna walked beside her. Her attorney, Amara Vega, flanked the other side. No press this time, just quiet stares from courthouse regulars who now recognized her face, if not her strength. Her children were already seated. Martin in a charcoal suit, twitching his leg, Claire staring daggers, lips pursed, Julia scrolling through her phone as if none of this mattered. Eleanor didn't look at them. She looked at the judge. "Mrs. Whitaker," the judge began, "thank you for your presence today. After reviewing all submitted documents, medical evaluations, witness statements, and the validity of both wills, this court is prepared to rule." Silence thickened. First, the revised will is found to be valid and enforceable. Claire gasped. Julia muttered, "What?" Martin stayed stone-faced as if preparing for the next round. Second, the judge continued. Given the evidence of premeditated financial exploitation and forged documents, specifically the falsified loan applications, under Mrs. Whitaker's name, the court is referring Mr. Martin Whitaker to the district attorney's office for potential criminal investigation. Martin's jaw clenched. "You can't be serious. You may sit down, Mr. Whitaker." He did. Third, the judge said, voice clear and final. The plaintiffs will receive no portion of the estate, effective immediately. They are further ordered to pay all court costs and reimburse legal fees incurred by Mrs. Whitaker. Claire choked on air. Julia stood suddenly, whispering furiously to her attorney. He didn't move. Across the aisle, Eleanor sat perfectly still, Inside her chest, her heart was a drum, but not from fear, from peace. Not triumph, just truth, fully heard. After court adjourned, reporters did gather this time, but she offered no comment. Just a quiet walk down the courthouse steps, her cane clicking softly beside Anna's heels. Amara joined her curbside. You didn't just win, Eleanor. You ended the cycle. Eleanor nodded. Let the silence say the rest. That evening, she returned to the beach house as dusk painted the sky. The waves greeted her, like old friends. She made tea, sat on the porch, and watched the clouds turn soft pink and orange. The ocean didn't roar tonight. It whispered. A knock at the door came just as she placed her cup down. She opened it slowly. No one was there, just an envelope on the welcome mat. Inside, a simple handwritten note. Grandma, I saw the verdict. I'm proud of you. I'd like to visit if you'll let me. Leo, at home, she finds a letter slipped under her door from her grandson. They erased me. He found me. Eleanor stood frozen in the doorway, Leo's note still open in her hands. The air outside smelled like sea salt and eucalyptus. It carried something else too, something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. She folded the paper carefully, like it might tear if mishandled. Then she reached for her phone with steady fingers. 2 days later he arrived. A lanky 17-year-old with shaggy hair, sleeves pushed up over skinny wrists, a backpack slung carelessly over one shoulder. He stood at the front steps with both hands in his hoodie pocket, rocking slightly on his heel. When Eleanor opened the door, they just looked at each other for a long second. Then Leo said, "Hi, Grandma," and she did something she hadn't done in months. She smiled. Board games he remembered from when he was little. Old family albums Leo hadn't seen in years. He pointed at a black and white photo of Eleanor and her late husband in front of the beach house, sun behind them. "I remember him," Leo said quietly. "He used to sneak me strawberry candy." Eleanor chuckled. "He never could say no to you." Over dinner, Leo fidgeted with his fork before blurting, "My mom's furious that I wrote you." Eleanor sipped her tea. "I'm not surprised. She said I was betraying her. I told her you were the only one who never asked me to pick sides." Her breath caught, but she said nothing. Leo looked up. "You're the only one who feels like family. Real fam." Eleanor stared into his eyes, seeing pieces of the man her son could have been, the man she raised, before resentment carved him hollow. Later, they watched a storm roll in from the back porch. Thunder rumbled low and steady, rain streaking across the glass. Leo turned to her. "Do you ever regret having them?" Eleanor didn't answer right away. "I regret who they chose to become," she finally said. "But never the love I gave. That was real, even if they buried it." Leo nodded, eyes on the rain. "Thank you for letting me be here." She reached out, took his hand gently. "Thank you for showing up." The next morning, Anna stopped by with a basket of fresh bread. When she saw Leo on the porch, she blinked, then grinned. Well, so the bloodline isn't completely rotten." Leo laughed. Eleanor glanced at him. "He's doing more than trying." By the end of the week he had cleared the attic, helped fix the garden fence, and even repaired a wobbly step on the porch. They baked, painted, and played music on her old record player. It wasn't just a visit, it was restoration. Then came the text. From Julia. "You've crossed a line. Stay away from my son. This is the last warning." Leo saw it too. He looked at Eleanor. "Should I stop coming?" She didn't hesitate. "Not unless you want to." His reply was instant. "I don't." Julia texts furiously, "Stay away from my son. They tried to ban me. From love. I chose it anyway." Julia's message came like a storm cloud. But Eleanor didn't answer it. She didn't need to, because Leo showed up the next day, same time, same hoodie, same grin, except this time he had something clutched in both hands. "Made you something," he said sheepish, kind of dumb. But he handed her a small wooden sign, crudely sanded, edges slightly uneven. In blue paint, block letters read, "World's Strongest Grandma." Her throat tightened. She looked at him, really looked, and saw no deception, no angle, no entitlement, just a boy who wanted to stay connected to something real. Hurrah! They hung the sign in the kitchen together. It stayed there long after he left that night. Outside, over the next week, Their visits continued. In secret. Neighbors helped. Frank, from across the dunes, let Leo park behind his truck. Anna covered for him at the corner cafe. Even Mrs. Rhodes, the grumpy widow from 2 doors down, kept quiet and sent over cinnamon rolls. This time, Eleanor wasn't tanting alone, but Julia was unraveling. First came the messages, 3, then 5, then over a dozen. You're manipulating him. He's a child. You have no rights. You're lucky I don't call the cops. Then came the threat. Custody court. Eleanor called Amara. She doesn't have a case, the attorney said calmly. You're not violating any restraining orders. Leo's old enough to speak for himself. And frankly, if she escalates, it'll look worse for her. Eleanor exhaled. I just don't want him caught in the middle. Then let him speak for himself. Amara said. He's not a pawn, he's a witness to your truth. That evening, Leo showed up with his sketchbook. I drew something, he said. I was thinking, if you ever let me paint the guest room, maybe this could go up. Inside the sketch pad was a watercolor of the beach house. Porch lights glowing, waves in the distance, her silhouette in the window. You made me look tall, Eleanor teased. You are, he replied. You just needed someone to see it. She hugged him. Then, really hugged him, arms tight, chin on his shoulder. I'm not going anywhere, Leo, not unless you ask me to. He pulled back. Can I ask you something else? Instead. She waited. Can I spend Christmas here? With you? Not since before the stroke. Not since her family stopped pretending. Of course you can, she whispered. This house, it's always been yours too. But they forgot one thing. Love doesn't take orders. It finds its way home. And tonight, mine did. Leo asks if he can spend Christmas with her. They held inheritance parties. I held love's feast. Snow had dusted the porch railings like powdered sugar by the time Leo arrived Christmas morning. He was wrapped in a red scarf, cheeks flushed from the wind, arms full of gifts he'd wrapped himself. Badly, but with heart. Eleanor opened the door and beamed. You made it. Wouldn't miss it, he said, stepping into the warmth. The beach house didn't smell like money or entitlement anymore. It smelled like cinnamon, pine, roasting turkey, and something deeper belonged. The dining table was covered in plaid, candles flickering between platters of food. Friends and neighbors filled the house with laughter and warmth. Frank brought his infamous sweet potato pie. Anna arrived in a Santa hat. Even Rhodes came, grumbling, only because I didn't want leftovers. Leo sat beside Eleanor, carving the ham like his grandfather once had. Let me guess. Anna teased. You cook now too. Learning from the best. Leo said, nudging Eleanor gently. Later, they gathered around the fireplace, hot cider in hand. Music played low, old jazz from vinyl. Classic, familiar. Leo stood awkwardly, then raised his glass. I'd like to make a toast, he said. To Grandma, who didn't just survive this year, but changed everything. He looked at her with a proud, quiet smile. You taught me what family actually means. And you gave me something no one else ever has. Eleanor raised her brows. And what's that? A home, he said. Even the wind outside hushed to listen. Eleanor stood, eyes glassy, and clinked her glass gently to his. To chosen family, she whispered. The group echoed back. To chosen family. And after dinner, Leo opened one last gift, a slim, leather-bound journal with gold-edged pages. On the inside cover, Eleanor had written, For your story, write it louder than they wrote you off. Love, Grandma, he hugged her fiercely. I will. From the hallway, Eleanor caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror, standing tall beside a boy who had refused to forget her, not just alive, loved. But outside, behind the icy glass of a parked car across the street, another figure watched. Julia, hands gripping the steering wheel. Eyes narrow with fury, she saw the light, the laughter, the bond she'd tried to destroy, thriving without her. Outside, Julia watches through the window, seething. They celebrated my death. I celebrated my life. Inside the beach house, the morning light stretched across the hardwood floor, golden and slow, catching dust like glitter in the air. A fire crackled gently in the hearth. The tree, now stripped of its ornaments, stood quietly in the corner, still smelling of pine. Eleanor sat at the kitchen table with her journal open and a pen between her fingers. Her tea had gone lukewarm, she didn't mind. Today wasn't about rushing, it was about remembering, not the silence of abandonment, the silence of peace. She looked up, eyes falling on the photos lining the mantel, new ones. Her, Leo, Anna, Frank, the volunteers from the kitchen, even the stray cat who'd adopted her porch in October. The old family photos still hung, she hadn't erased her history. She'd just reframed it, the kind that goes so long, it forgets what connection even felt like. And Eleanor had let them go, not out of malice, out of mercy, for herself. Leo came by every weekend now, sometimes with friends, sometimes just to sit by the fire and talk about school, girls, art, the world. She was his confidant now, not a relic, not a burden, a grandmother, a grandmother. A knock came at the door. It was Anna, bundled in a long coat, holding 2 pastries in a paper bag. "You're not journaling again, are you?" "I am," Eleanor said, smiling. "Just finished the final line." Anna handed her a cinnamon twist. "What'd you write?" Eleanor paused, then read aloud. "They planned my end. I rewrote my beginning." They stood together at the window, watching the waves roll in. Somewhere down the beach, Leo was sketching again, the wind tugging at his sleeves. Anna rested a hand on Eleanor's shoulder. "You okay?" "I'm not okay," Eleanor said. "I'm better." She glanced up at the mantel once more, then down at the journal, then out to the sea, wide, untamed, full of beginnings. "I rewrote my beginning."